All right, so beta 002 of the baseball sim substitution suggester, auto sub, semi auto manager, whatever we're going to call this thing. Um, we are going to take a look today at version 2. Version 2 is a little more streamlined. I'm actually going to switch this from this Mets and Cubs to Dodgers, no, Giants and Reds opening day. I just did play it, but I want to show you kind of how it all works. The layout is zoomed in a little bit just so it's easier to see on YouTube. I think a lot of times when people are recording their screens, especially with like Stratomatic Sims and um, other sort of utilities, you can barely see the screen, barely see the text, so you don't really know what the heck's going on. So I've zoomed it up here a little bit larger than normal. Normal zoom is probably, let's see, view 100% right there. So right now, if you're watching this on YouTube, you probably can't see much of anything, but that would be the normal view that you would uh, use this at. I'm gonna double it up, maybe to here is where you'd use it. But anyway, I'm gonna double it up some more so we can see what the heck is going on here. So first thing, to use pinch hit platoon factors. This will take into account the handedness of the pitcher. So even though you're prompted to choose either a lefty or righty pinch hitter or any pinch hitter, it's still, when you have that clicked on, it still will use, how often this guy pinch hit against a lefty or how often this guy pinch hit against a righty. There's no buttons anymore. Everything is done by either right clicking or double clicking on cells. So let's take a look at what we got here. Right now, it's still only working really for as played games. I'm not working on loading manual lineups yet. I'm working with a 1979 National League NPNG Plus replay that I've started. Started it tonight, and since I'm doing that, I want to work out all the kinks with this app and then just add in the manual lineup feature later. So I'm going to go up here and choose San Francisco at Cincinnati. Before I load everything, I want to show you everything that I've done over here on the rosters tab. I'm going to expand this as well, zoom this in. So you'll see that there's a bunch of columns here that have zeros filled out thus far anyway. And then this SR and RR. These are two pitching ratings that I use from the old Status Pro ratings. They're modified a little bit. They're actually expanded so that they're based on actual stats starting and actual stats relieving, which of course means some guys that started one game with a 12 ERA have an SR of like 98, which means they can pitch forever. But obviously, I'm not going to use them that way. But it's used more just as a guideline when I'm playing my games. Anyway, you fill in the team games numbers, the game started numbers, because obviously, if you're talking about suggesting substitutions, you need to know if this guy was a pinch hit, 5 times. Was that a pinch hit 5 times in 5 games, or was that a pinch hit 5 times in 100 games that he was available? So, and in the app, when I'm done, when I release this, will fill in probably all of these columns. The team games, the game started, the games available to sub, which depending on how you manage your rosters could either be exactly what they were available in real life, or it could be more if you're going to leave all players on the active roster all the time. So you just have to set that up however it is that you're going to do it. Games started plus games available to sub should be days on the roster for that player. So if Benny Ayala was only on the roster for 40 days, then I'm going to total those up to be 40. So if you started 12 games, he's going to be available to sub 28 games. If you're going to leave him on the roster every single day, though, you need to change that games available to sub to be 162 minus whatever I just said, 12 starts, which would leave him at 150 for games available to sub. And then games available to relieve. For my replay, what I'm doing is a starting pitcher, I mark him as unavailable to relieve the 2 days before his start and the 2 days after his start. And I'm going to show you here in a minute what I did for San Francisco and Cincinnati. Those are the first two that I played. I'm going to scroll down here. All right, let's take a look at the Reds. So I filled in, team games for everybody. Game started. I did all this stuff manually just because I haven't gotten around to writing all the code for that yet. Let's see. So you see team games, game started, games available to sub. These two, like Doug Bear was on the roster every single day. He is going to be available to relieve every single day because he didn't have any starts. Some guys down here, like Paul Blair, he started 37 games, was available as a sub 97 games for a total of 134 games on the roster. And so all the usage calculations will base that on those numbers. So again, if he was a pinch hitter, 10 times in 97 games that he was available, then as long as he's only active on the roster and available to sub 97 times, he should roughly pinch hit 10 times. Naturally, it's going to vary. It's not going to be identical. It doesn't keep track of how many times in the past he's already been used as a pinch hitter, etc. It's just going to spread out those 10 appearances likely over those 97 games. Active, to make a player active or inactive, you double click the cell. Paul Blair is currently inactive. Johnny Bench is currently active. That would make him inactive. Double click, turn back to yes. Games available to relieve, I told you how I calculate that. This number needs to be the total number of days that he is going to be, total number of games that he's going to be available to pitch from the bullpen. So depending on how you're going to manage your bullpen, you need to set that right, or just leave it and the app will take care of everything anyway. You may get some pitchers being used too much and some being used too little, but that's up to you, how you want to do it. I think that's about it on this stuff. So you set your active rosters ahead of time. Notice that I single clicked Paul Blair, nothing changed because I have to double click. And you can also just enter a Y instead of double clicking if you want, but it seems to be a little faster to double click. Then fill in the team games. That'll already be filled in. Game started will already be filled in. Games available to sub will be based on my my player appearance grids with transactions. You can modify it from there however you want to do it. Games available to relieve will also be filled in based on my player appearance grids with transactions. So that's it for the rosters tab. So we go back to the game tab. I'm going to go ahead and load this. So I double click on load as played lineups. Are you sure? Yes. And it does all of its magic and fills everything in. You'll notice that it's doing some calculations. Over here in this debug messages, I still have that turned on so that you can see what the heck's going on. Top of the first, instead of clicking batter by batter, like if you've seen video 1, instead of clicking batter by batter, it goes through everybody and does all the calculations now. And so when we get to a sub situation, you will see over in this left-hand column what the sub suggestion is. There's not a lot of subs actually that these two teams made, so maybe it's not a great idea for us to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and just start changing the inning. So at the end of the first, when you go to the bottom of the first, you double click on the inning bar here. Down here it's doing some stuff. It's checking pinch hitting, it's checking pinch running, it's checking defensive replacement. So it's doing all that stuff for you on the fly. Defensive replacements, of course, are only checked when you go from the top of the inning to the bottom of the inning. It doesn't do defensive replacements in the middle of an inning. There are sims out there that will do that. Kind of irritates me a little bit, unless you're doing a double switch. Usually players are not replaced in the middle of an inning. So let's go ahead and do some more here, top of the third. Usually until the 6th or the 7th, you have very few defensive replacement suggestions. Now keep in mind that this is going to randomize things as well. So I've got to double check this, but when a player did not appear in this combination of, let's see, score and inning or score and phase of game, and he has no stats to base off, this NA will appear. That means that likely, of course, if he didn't have any defensive replacement, or pinch hitting or pinch running numbers in there, you're going to see an NA. I need to figure out what I'm going to do there for when a guy has, let's say, an NA for being pinch hit for or being pinch run for, but not the other. I don't think there should be situations where that would occur, so maybe I don't have to do that. But anyway, this just means there's no data here for Geronimo, Cesar Geronimo, and I got to double click that because I would think there would be for him, but that's beside the point. I need to make sure it's pulling the right data there. But if you see an NA, it means that player, in theory, didn't have any pinch hit or pinch run data in this combination of tie game and bottom of the fifth, roughly. Because, of course, if you watch the first video, you know that I use ranges of innings. So continue on to the bottom of the sixth, top of the seventh, bottom of the seventh. Okay. This won't happen when we go live, but I'm going to show it here anyway. When we went from the top of the seventh to the bottom of the seventh, the Giants went into the field and the Reds came up to plate. So this app will check all of the defensive replacements for the team going into the field, make any suggestions, and then it will check all pinch hitting and all pinch running for the team coming up to bat, all 9 players at the same time. So let's say that right now George Foster is going to be leading off the bottom of the seventh. If we get to Tom Seaver and ignore the fact that pinch hitting and pinch running suggestions for pitchers won't be included because they're in theory managed completely differently based on how they're pitching, and there's more variables than I can account for in here because we're not tracking individual pitcher allowed stats, that kind of stuff. You'll see PH next to a player if the suggestion is to pinch hit for that player. So it doesn't know that, Foster's due up first in this inning. It's basically saying if you get to Tom Seaver or whoever in the lineup has that PH behind them, the suggestion is to pinch hit for them. Over here on the Giants, the suggestion here is to replace Bill North in center field for a defensive replacement. Now, you may think, hey, Bill North, great defender. I don't want to replace him. Keep in mind that these stats that I'm using are based on not only, like in this case, the player's defensive ability, but also injuries. So he may have been hurt in the 7th or 8th because I lumped those 2 innings together for defensive replacements, pinch hitting and pinch running. He may have been injured. He may, it may be legitimate. The guy is not that great, like Jack Clark in right field. We generally want to replace him late in the game, especially a close game. So this basically is we went from the top of the 7th to the bottom of the 7th, went through all of the defense, made any suggestions, went through all of the offense, made any pinch hit or pinch run suggestions. If we look down here, I don't have enough debug messages here to account for everything, but basically you see like here, checking defense for Bill North. He has a 100 rating, which means on a random roll between 1 and 999 now, not 1,000 because I checked my calculations, but between 1 and 999, we came up with a number less than or equal to 100, in this case 62. So that means that we're going to suggest to replace him. So we moved on after that. We looked for everybody else's defense. So first we check for pinch hitting, then we check for pinch running, then we check for defensive replacements. So down here before George Foster, let's see, Johnny Bench. So Joe Morgan actually was being looked at for potentially pinch running. The number that his rating is under 325, so there was no suggestion to pinch run. Here, there's a suggestion to replace Bill North defensively because the random number is under his rating. Up here, Bill Madlock has a 32, which means 3.2% of the time. Bill Madlock in a tie game in the 7th or 8th is going to get replaced defensively. Again, doesn't mean that it's a strategy move. It's just a player move that includes injuries, right? So we roll a 428. We're not going to replace him. Here, Jack Clark, replace him 1.4% of the time. We rolled a 269, so we don't replace him. Mark Hill, a rating of 87. We rolled a 270, don't replace him. Roger Metzger, a rating of 21. We rolled a 601, don't replace him. Let's see. Let's continue on. Top of the eighth. Now everything changes again. We're going to be suggested to pinch hit, provide a blue, even though pitchers aren't going to be included. Bottom of the eighth, top of the ninth. All right. Here's an interesting one. This does not mean that we suggest you home run for Mark Hill. This means that he passed both the pinch hit rating check and the pinch run rating check. And the suggestion is to do both. Well, obviously, you can't do both. If you pinch hit for him, you can't pitch run for him. But what it is saying is, look, we're suggesting both. So if you choose not to pinch hit for him, if he reaches base, we suggest you pinch run for him. So that's what the HR means. On the bottom of the ninth, again, we left North in, and now it's suggesting again that Bill Norris should be replaced defensively. We go to extra innings. One of the interesting things that you'll see, let's say this is 7-0 now, as we go to the bottom of the 10th, you may see more suggestions. Here, Mark Hill, Bill Madlock didn't appear in extra innings when they were up by 7, mainly because you're seldom up by 7. Everybody else apparently did, or there's some sort of number that we go back to. It's not I don't have data for this scenario. It is, I check this exact scenario. If I don't have any ratings, I then check a broader rating. So like, for example, if I have inning and score, I may revert from score to just inning. So, Bill Madlock didn't have any data in this particular one, and then when we reverted back to the inning, and then I think we revert back one more to an overall. There's no data available. So here, as we go to the top of the 13th, it's suggesting George Foster be replaced defensively. Boom. When you do replace somebody and you choose the drop down, let's say we're putting Dave Collins, you do have to fill in the batting, although currently the spreadsheet doesn't use this data anywhere. Even if you have, pinch hit platoon factors and you choose, I want to have a righty, it doesn't use the data in here. It uses the data on the rosters tab because this never changes. It's going to be pretty much stagnant the whole year. So it should be accurate. So let's take a look at, again, how to substitute. That hasn't changed from the first version. If I want to go to the bullpen, right, it's going to look at, top of the 13th, the score, etc. So let's start a new game first of all. Right now it's showing you doing some stuff that is going to stay on the screen that you won't see later, mainly because I'm still running this in development mode and I want to see everything that's going on. So I'm going to go to the top of the 8th. All right, so I said when you go to like the top of an inning, change the inning, it runs everything at once. It runs the defensive replacements, it runs pinch hitting, it runs pinch running. All those ratings are, again, based on inning or stage of the game and score of the game. So the reason that it works better now, instead of going batter by batter by batter like we were last night, and a lot of clicking, now it runs everything based on the current score and stage. When the score changes, so let's say the Giants score 3 runs, I need to double click that cell to change it. If I actually go in and change this to 3, the macros don't run. At least the macros didn't run earlier. Let's change it to 4-0. So I double click the visitors, the Giants score, and it changes it, and then it reruns everything. So if there are any new suggestions when you get to there for pinch hitting and pinch running, that's what you should use when that batter gets up. So let's say for whatever reason Dan Dreesen had a PH here after we ran this. So now as we go, even though he's not up in the top of the 8th, so technically that can't be there. So let's get rid of that. Let's put Darrell Evans a PH. And let's say right now Jack Clark is up, right? It's 4-0. And let's say when we go to 5-0, they score again. 5-0, the pinch hit goes away. Now Darrell Evans is up. You would not pinch hit for him. It's not going to affect your player usage. The randomization changes, but it's still going to be random, so it's not really going to change anything. So every time the score in your baseball game changes, you need to go over and change the score. That will automatically rerun all the substitution data and come up with new recommendations. Okay, sometimes the stage of the game, obviously the stage of the game doesn't change when a run scores, but the score of the game, this run differential, changes, and it's grouped by 4 runs, behind 4 runs or more, behind, let's see, behind 3 runs more? It's either 3 or 4. And then behind 2 or 3, yeah, it's behind 4 or more, behind 2 or 3, behind by 1 or tied, up 1, 2, or 3, and then up 4 or more. Those are the categories. So when the score changes in or out of one of those groups, your substitution data can change, sometimes dramatically. So you want to keep that score up to date, and it will automatically rerun for new subs. When you want to pull somebody out of the San Francisco bullpen to the mound, you say, you double click on the bullpen. It says, do you want any reliever? Click yes. Or choose a righty or lefty reliever. Click no. So if we say yes, it's going to do some calculations, and it's going to say choose Joe Coleman. All right. If I double click and say no, it's going to prompt me, do you want a left-handed reliever? If so, click yes. Do I want a right-handed reliever? If so, click no. If I say yes, it may not actually give me a left-handed reliever. If all the lefty relievers in your bullpen did not appear in this situation, you may end up going to a righty, just because your bullpen pitchers were never used in that scenario. So this is not going to suggest that you use them in that scenario. Typically, you won't run into that. In this case, now it said I want Joe Curtis. So if we double click again, I say no, and this time I want a righty reliever, I say no. This time I got Joe Coleman again, apparently because his rating is pretty darn high. And Griffin and Halicki didn't appear in this scenario, so we're always going to go to Joe Coleman. So that's choosing a bullpen pitcher, and then you'd come over here, choose Joe Coleman manually right now anyway, change him here. And just be sure to update the pitcher handedness, because that's important in some other calculations. It doesn't necessarily matter that you've got the right pitcher here. You'll want to definitely have the right pitcher in the lineup, but it doesn't matter here if it's right or wrong. And when you do put somebody into the game, like here we put Joe Coleman in, this will happen automatically when I have a public release. But just go ahead and delete Joe Coleman from your bullpen. That way he won't be suggested again. Cincinnati bullpen, guess what? Same scenario. Double click Cincinnati bullpen, choose any reliever, righty or lefty, whatever. And we'll do that. Giants bench, Reds bench, when you need a pinch hitter or a pinch runner. Not when you need a defensive replacement, at least at this point. I think I will add that data in so that your defensive replacements will be based on who subbed the most, which of course makes sense. We have the data. We may as well use it. That way we don't have to look at data and choose who to use in that position. It's not going to account for, hey, we could pull a double switch and put this guy here and this guy there, and our defense would be better, but it's going to give you, realistic defensive replacement usage. So we double click on the Giants. Do you want a pinch hitter? Click yes, or a pinch runner? Click no. And of course, all of these, if you just want to exit, you can click cancel, and it'll exit out. We're going to choose a pinch runner. It goes through some calculations. Says, hey, choose Rob Andrews. All right. We would choose Rob Andrews. We would put him in the lineup. We would remove him from the bench, and we'd move along. Pinch hitters, same thing, but this time we say, do you want any pinch hitter or righty or lefty pinch hitter? Click no. So click no if you want to choose whether you want a righty or a lefty. And again, you may run out of righties or lefty, and it may actually give you somebody else. But in this case, I'm going to say just any pinch hitter. It does some stuff, and it says Larry Herndon is going to be the pinch hitter that I use. And again, if I was going to actually use him, I would say Larry Herndon comes in as a pinch hitter for Evans that we replaced. and we would get rid of Herndon here. And then if the score changes, and now we get back into a closer game, it may say, you know, pinch hit for Herndon if he comes up again, or pinch run for Herndon if he just reached base, and then things change. When a player is put in the lineup, I've got to write the code to go ahead and rerun everything, because I want the ability for somebody to be pinch ran for when they pinch hit, you know, because that can happen relatively frequently. You'll notice when the scenario changed from 5-2 to 5-3, and now we're going to pinch run for Mark Hill if he reaches base in this inning. Interesting scenario, I guess, would be if the score changed and now Hill was on second and he came up as a pinch run. Would you pinch run for him? And I'm going to leave that up to you guys. I don't know what I'd do there. So certainly could be a scenario that you don't pinch run for him when he immediately reaches base, but then you pinch run for him later. And then finally, the Reds bench, same thing, pinch hitter or pinch runner. Who do I want? No, I want a right-handed batter, so I click no. And Arturo DeFreitas is going to be the pinch when I choose hitter. He's going to be the righty that we want to bring in. So we would then bring him in for whoever's pinch hitting for and go remove him from the bench. Seems a little kludgy once you get used to it. It actually works quite well. I used this for my first test game in my 1979 National League NPNG Plus replay that I just started tonight, and it works really well. I wished I'd had a little easier game to do my first test with. You know, this is just like the old scenario where you try to get one more game in before you go to bed, and naturally it goes, you know, 20 innings or so. This one went, I think, 11. Reds led 4-3 going into the top of the ninth. The reliever came in and blew it. I think it was Pastore. And then the Giants scored 2 in the top of the 11th. The Reds scored 1 in the bottom of the 11th. They had first and third, 1 out. And luckily, they didn't score anymore. Otherwise, I would have had to go to the 12th and continue on a long game. I like easy games. But anyway, I'll be posting this video soon. As soon as you see on BaseballSimResearch.com that version 002 of the beta is up, you can download that and work with that. This one today is the 8th, so the beta for that one will expire probably on the 12th. So you'll be able to mess around, download and mess around with this a little bit until then. That's it from here. Hopefully this explains what the heck I'm doing. And if you have any questions, visit the Delphi forum. There's a link on the website directly to the thread. So that's it from here. Take it easy, everyone.